Welcome to another vintage fishing reel service video. In this episode, we'll be looking at one of the Sidewinder type reels. This one is a Shakespeare caster spin wonder reel, number 1770, and the model is FF. So that means it was first introduced in 1955, according to the Shakespeare date codes. A Sidewinder. So this is Shakespeare's version of a Sidewinder, and I've done one on this channel, did a service and showed how the Wright and McGill version of the Sidewinder works. You can see that there, and I think I've shown the Johnson version of the Sidewinder. This happens to be, they made several different models, different sizes. This happens to be the Model 20 Sidewinder. So this one is Shakespeare's version of one of those types of reels, those spin or cast, quote-unquote Sidewinder types. So unlike some of the other sidewinding reels, like perhaps the Johnson Sidewinders, I don't think this one is quite as versatile in terms of the configurations. In other words, I don't think you can use it this way, or this way, or this way, or that way. And the main reason I think that is because if you look at the pickup pin, it is basically like a claw instead of a straight peg that comes out. So it's only designed to work in one direction. And as I take this apart, you'll see that the pickup pin mechanism isn't something that you can flip over and sort of change the direction of that hook. So based on what I can see, I think that's the case, and if that's true, which I think it is, about the only way that you can really use it is as an underspin in this direction. So you're winding with your left hand. When you do that, you're winding with your left hand, you can see that the pin is out. Okay. If I turn it around this way and I'm winding this way, if I try to make a right hand underspin, you see that the pin is in, and if I turn it backwards, it comes out. See, so you can't have it an under rod and have a right hand retrieve, but you could have it. You could have it in the spin cast position above the rod and wind with your left hand. You can see that the pin is out when I wind it with the left hand, but if I turn around and try to use it with the right hand and I'm winding forward, the pin is in. So you'd have to reel backwards in order to have it on top of the rod and in right hand retrieve. So I think there's only two configurations where this one works. It's not adaptable to others. One is below the rod, left hand retrieve. One is above the rod, also left hand retrieve. So I think, based on what I'm seeing, you can only retrieve via the left hand, either above rod or below rod. So another neat thing about this one is you'll notice this little hexagonal hole there. And the only thing I can think that would be used for is a built-in tool. So a built-in tool to take off the nut on the spinner head, and it also fits the nut on the crank. So that's kind of nifty. You got your own built-in tool on the cap. Now I'm not going to be using that because I don't want to. Of course, back then they probably didn't care if they chipped the paint a little bit, but it might start the paint to a chipping. So I don't really want to use that for its intended purpose. Now this one, when I got it, and that's typical of these Shakespeare's. I think it's some kind of a copper alloy, some brass in there. You can see it's corroding green. It's got some kind of a copper rich alloy, and it tends to want to corrode, and this thing gets all stuck where you can't move it at all. And you got to be really careful because this bakelite can be brittle, and if you start forcing it, you'll break that beautiful bakelite off there. So I soaked this in PB Blaster, for a day or so, and even then it wasn't working free. But I wrapped a towel around it and got some pliers and just gently started rocking it and got it to start moving. And then once I could spin it, then I would just spin, put more penetrant in there and spin and spin. Eventually that corrosion, that oxidation, that chunks of material, that works itself out. Now it's working great. So I saved that one. So let's go ahead and get started on this 1955 Shakespeare spinner cast wonder reel, number 1770, model FF. So I've never been into one of these before, and as I indicated, I have not been able to find any schematic or instructions or anything, and so as with many of these, I'm exploring and learning as I go. Let me go ahead and take off the spinner head next, being real careful here because again I don't know what to expect. Looks like the nuts on the spinner head and on the crank handle are the same nut, and it looks like, is there a little, doesn't appear to be a washer. Okay, so a bunch of dried up grease in there. Not too dry, but not great either. You got your little felt pad there, that a tension spring, and so I just don't know. I don't see any way to flip this over and reverse the direction of that line pickup. So it's I suppose conceivable that you can't flip this any way you want and crank to anywhere you want. Obviously on the free line there was a way to change the direction, but I'm just not sure if you can on that. That goes on that way, and that hook comes, that grabs that line only in that direction. So I don't know, and luckily it's set up the way it's going to work for me, and so I'm happy with that. I'm happy with the way it is. Looks like to get the spool off, there's a little clip here that I'm going to have to sneak off of there, and without hopefully damaging the thing. No, that's not too terrible. I shouldn't speak too soon. That's not too terrible. So there's your little spring-like clip that holds, I presume. Okay, and then you've got a, looks like a brass washer, and then off comes your spool, and that's got some line on it. Line doesn't look terribly old. Maybe somebody, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's probably old, but it doesn't look as old as and crappy as some of them. But it's hard to imagine this having been used anytime recently, but it's possible because there are nuts like me that use this really old stuff. So let's get that line off of there. My goodness, that held a lot of line. Nice thing about this one, this spool, has a line here that says fill to here. That's one of the real problems that a lot of people have with spin casters, is they either don't put enough line on or they put too much. And obviously after a while you sort of get used to what's ideal, but it's nice to have something there indicating where's the ideal place to fill the line to. But man, that held a lot of line. I'd almost be inclined on some of these waste so much line because very little of it ever actually leaves the reel. Might get some backing and put on there some of that, what is it called, Delcron, or I can't remember what it is. It's kind of a cotton-like fishing line. I don't think it's cotton, but whatever, just to save line. But at any rate, the inside of the cover is pretty clean. I don't think this reel got used much. I mean, I really don't really see a scratch on it. It's just beautiful. I don't think these things were out very long before, like Zebcos and stuff that, were true spin cast reels and, and had the push button and so on, and everybody moved to those. Okay, so this does appear to have some kind of a drag mechanism on here. So this says more or less, and basically what it does is if you turn it to less, this little piece here goes down and away from the spool. So when you've got your spool on there, that goes down, and when you tighten it to where it says more, that pops up and puts pressure against the spool. Obviously you've got this hole up here, and I would assume that that's for, man-made drag, so to speak. Okay, so I figured out what the primary purpose of this hole is. Because it has its own drag, and because this only, touching this only controls the movement of the spinner head rather than the spool, which can turn on its own. So if there's a fish pulling it, you could be holding on to this and it could still pull drag. The purpose, so on a lot of these Sidewinder types, when you released the line, so you retracted the pickup pin, you would have to hold on to the line maybe up against the rod or whatever while you casted. Otherwise the line would just, your bait would just drop to the ground. On this one, you can do that by holding the spinner head with your thumb through that hole. So as it is right now, if I don't hold that, okay, I've got a bobber on there, and I turn the crank backwards to release the pickup pin, retract the pickup pin. Oh, no, it ain't doing it. There it goes. That just drops. So I can hold that up, release, and it would just drop to the ground. So when you're casting, you have to hold that, release the pickup pin. So I've turned that backwards. Now I can cast, and as I cast, I let loose of that just as I come to the end of my motion, casting motion, and that releases the line. So hold on to that, turn that back, cast, and go through your casting motion, and just at the end of your motion, let go of that, and your lure or your bobber or whatever goes flying. So rather than having to hold the line up here, you can do it from the reel, which is very similar to the standard 1950s standard 0-hour bomb company, or Zebco, which in this case you push down on this to release the line, but you still had to hold the line. It didn't have a line stop, so you would hold this, which is linked up to the spinner head, and then while you're holding that, you can't get any line to come out. If I let off of that, if I let off the button, then line comes out while that is depressed. And of course, to bring that back up so that you can wind in line again, you push in the handle. But the difference on this one is, the similarity is that yes, you have to hold on to that during your casting motion and then let loose. But this one, it also works as drag, so there's no other drag mechanism. So if a fish is pulling line, the whole handle and the spinner head moves, and so does this I don't know what you call it in there, but it rotates with the spinner head. So in order to slow the fish down, you put your thumb on that and adjust the drag manually with your thumb. Your thumb is the drag. So this one, unlike many of the sidewinders, has its own drag, and it has, instead of holding the line in front of the rod, this one would allow you not to have so much handle in front of the rod. Like a lot of times you have to use these on a fly rod or something. This one you wouldn't have to, because you don't need to have your hand up here to grab the line. You can just use the thumb as your line stop, turn that handle back, and out it comes. All right, let's take off the business end here, the side plate. Again, there's your I assume that's the bait clicker there. I guess so. That kind of makes a bait clickery sound. And I don't know what that thing is. So we'll get in there and see what happens. Keep my thumb on it in case there's any springs or whatever. Okay. Pretty simple. We can just pull that main gear out of there. It just slips into it's got like a carriage type shaft on there, and it just slips into the square hole in the main gear like that. I don't think it matters if you flip that. I don't see any difference in this either side of that gear, so I don't know if it really matters. I'll try to keep it the way it was, just for wear purposes and so on. But that was your bait clicker here. So which way did that go? So that just, when you turn your bait clicker on, that brings that little spring-like thing into the teeth of the main gear and makes a clicking sound. That just ends up being essentially a bushing, I think. Yeah, that thing just ends up being a bushing over your pinion gear shaft, like that. That fits over the pinion gear shaft. This may be another one of those where I may not want to try to get out. I'd really like to, because that's one of those areas that really need to be lubricated and greased. But you know, this can come out. So this pin here can come out. I think it can be pushed out. I don't really like doing that, but I don't see any way. There's no clip here that I can see. To get the or is there? It's really hard to. My God, I think there is a little. Wow, that is tiny. Boy, I almost hate to try to get that off of there. That is one tiny. That is one. I don't even know if you'll be able to see it here, but there is a tiny little E-clip, or C. It's actually a C-clip for a change, and it is tiny. And I'm assuming if I got that off of there, that I could drop the whole shaft out. But boy, I almost hate trying to get that thing off of there. I can barely even see the the split in it. I'm afraid I'm going to shoot that thing across the room and then I'm going to be in trouble. I'm bending it. Hopefully I can bend it back when I put it back on. Where's my tweezers? There it is. It's just a little wire. And hopefully that'll allow me, to get off the pinion gear, and that's keyed. So that keys into the pinion gear shaft, and then the question is, why is that not wanting to push out now? There must be a clip in here. That's the one I need to get out. And I think I almost got a bite of that one. What a CF. That's what you call a CF. I'm just not gonna mess with it. If I get it out of there, then I'm gonna have a hairy of a time because it's recessed in there, and getting that back in, especially if it gets sprung or bent. So I'm just gonna try to lubricate the best that I can with the shaft in place. But that's pretty much all there is to disassembly. So I'm going to take those parts to the sink, scrub them up good, and be back just like that. Okay, I guess I'll start with putting the pinion gear back on. This pinion gear reminds me a lot of the bait casters with that kind of keyed into the spool shaft there. Let me get that set down on there, and I was able to free this up. It's moving much better now. I shot some WD-40 down in there, twisted it this way, did the same thing with the other side, and it was coming up black, so it was cleaning up in there and spewing some stuff out. So I think it's spinning as good as it'll get, and I'll just try to get a little oil worked into there, down in there, and just make sure that pinion gear shaft is working as good as it can and be as lubricated as well as it can be given the circumstances. Even now the oil's turning a little bit dark. Still a little dirt down in there. Not terrible. Now we got to get this little thing back on there. And the thing I don't like about it is they get bent, and it's kind of hard to get them snugged back up in there again because they're kind of springy. I wonder if I should try to bend it back before I put it over the shaft there. And let it spring into place, hopefully. So I kind of got it bent back into a circle, and hopefully it'll kind of snap over that groove. Okay, so when I was trying to put that tiny little springy wire clip back in place to get this pinion gear back on, I had tightened it up so that I could slip it down and get it over the groove there. And as I was doing that, it popped off, and I don't know where it went. And I don't think I can use my magnet to find it because it was a brass or some kind of other non-magnetic alloy. So I found another piece of similar material around here and managed to get one on there that fits in that groove. So basically I lost a piece, but actually I was looking for the piece that I lost and managed to find this. I don't know if it's a piece off a necklace or whatever, but it was a little looked like a little link of something, and it fit perfectly on there and does the job. So another reason to be, I went away from my towel as my backdrop, which I had to prevent parts from bouncing and so on, and I went to this hard material, which probably isn't as good for that, but maybe a little more aesthetic. But I don't even know if that was the deal. I think when I tried to slip it over that shaft, it needed to be stretched on there, and I think it just shot off somewhere. I don't think it would have mattered if I had a towel down or not. But at any rate, I've since got that on. Then I've greased the pinion gear, and so now and of course I've greased the main gear, and I've got that reassembled, and so now it's basically all that's left is to reassemble. So very simple reel. So to reassemble, you just want to line up this hole here that's associated with this piece here. It's basically just kind of like a bushing, where the pinion gear shaft rides. So you line that up, and these two things here for the screws to go in, line that up like that, and then you put in your screws. And now we're ready to put on our spinner head. And just simply put that nut back on there. And so there you have it, a circa 1955 Shakespeare cast or spin wonder reel, number 1770, model FF. Sidewinder is what they call them. It seems like it should be more of called a side caster, seeing how the line comes out here and bends that way instead of coming out like that frontwards. But they call them sidewinders. You could easily call it a side caster, I suppose. But at any rate, there it is. And hopefully this summer I can get out and use it and share that video with you. But until next time, thanks for watching.